So facing the challenge of evolution, so we're just reading from 2 Corinthians, this passage. And in verse 2 Corinthians 10:5, there's a command God gives us. It's he asks us to cast down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. So there, in this world, there are high things. People think that they think are good things. They think that are worthwhile things. People treat highly, right? They esteem highly, but actually are against the knowledge of God. There are many things that, and today I want to have one such thing, right? Because what does the knowledge of God say in the Bible? We read in Psalm 100. Know the Lord. Know that the Lord, He's God. It is He who has made us. Now we ourselves. We are His people and the sheep of His pasture. So the knowledge of God says that God made us, right? He's included it. But what's this high thing that we hear about in the world, right? It's from Charles Darwin in his book, Origin of Species. He says, thus from the war of nature, from famine and death, the most exalted object, the production of higher animals, directly follows. You see, we're exalted objects, according to Darwin. Look, God didn't make us, we made ourselves, right? Through war of nature, famine, and death, right? Through billions of years of fighting against other less fit animals, right? We're so good. We're like the ultimate, right? We're the end product of this series of fights and war and famine and so on. We're the exalted object, right? That's the high thing. But isn't it interesting, right? The Bible already warned us 2,000 years ago that people in the future will be exalting these high things, these high thoughts, these proud thoughts, and against the teaching of the Bible. Okay. Now, what's this high thing? What's this? Obviously, there are many high things, but this is one that I'm talking about today. What's this high thing evolution about? Well, it's the idea that we all animals, including human beings, all came from one original ancestor. And this happened supposedly over billions of years. And how did it happen? Well, nobody did it. There's no God involved. It happened by random processes. Random mutations occurred. So for example, you have a bunch of cells, and when a cell gets a new cell, or if you have a fish gets a baby fish, right? Through the process of reproduction, when mother gives to child, begets child, then mutations occur. When they copy their genes to the next generation, mistakes are made. And then because the different offspring get different mistakes, they compete against each other. Some that are more fit survive, right? They call the survival of the fittest, or natural selection. And then through that process, apparently, all the animals came about. So it's a slow, gradual process where mutations occur and competition between different organisms with different mutations. Some are more fit than others, and the ones that go on further and so on. That's the process, right? And really, I think our evolution is a chain. So you need biological evolution, which is the idea that a cell, the picture I just showed you, from a cell, you get all living things, right? But that really needs something else to happen first. It needs molecules to become the first cell, or so-called chemical evolution. And that also is requires something else. It requires that you have the beginning of the universe, right? You have to have nothing to become the universe, right? So it's a chain because if any of the links is broken, the whole chain collapses, right? You need every part of the chain to be working. And it turns out that now the part of the chain work. Okay. And evolution is very different from other sciences. This part is very important as well. Some people get intimidated and say, well, how can I argue against science, right? Isn't science true? Well, but science, the science that we know every day, like for example, I'm a medical doctor and I practice medicine. Well, in medical science, if I prescribe a medication, I have to make sure that medication works on someone first, right? I'm not going to tell my patient, look, nobody else has ever tried this medication. You be the first one. No, I don't think the medication will be very happy with that, right? That the medication has to be tested, right? And it deals with the present, right? The medication is right there in front of you. You can observe it. You can see how it works on people. It's observable, it's testable, it's repeatable, right? Many people take it and they find that they all find the blood pressure goes down. But, oh yeah, it's a medication that's good for lowering blood pressure. Same with other areas like physics or chemistry, engineering, mathematics. These are all things that you can see right now. You can repeat, you can do experiments on it. But the idea that from nothing came to man came from nothing, then from nothing you get the universe, from the universe you get chemicals, and chemicals became a cell, and cell became man. All this is something that's supposed to happen in the past you cannot see. It deals with the past, it cannot, it's unobservable, untestable, and unrepeatable, right? So don't be intimidated because it's really just a faith, right? It's not a science you can actually test and repeat. It's just a belief people have called the past. And by the way, it's a belief that's very important for atheists. Okay, if you don't want to believe in God, unfortunately, you have to believe something else, right? This is Richard Dawkins, the famous atheist, and this is what he said. Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. You see, he wanted to be he didn't want to believe in God, but the problem was he realizes, hold on a second, if I don't believe in God, intellectually, that's a problem. Where did I come from? Right? Where did the world come from? Right? It doesn't make sense to believe there's no God, and yet all these things are here. Right? So to be intellectually fulfilled, he needs evolution. He needs evolution. So that's why he has to believe it. Right? And I agree with him at this point, because I used to be evolutionist. When I was the age of some of you in high school, I didn't believe in God, and I believed in evolution. Right, and I realized if there was no evolution, I couldn't explain how the world came. Okay, so this is important. This is why this is why many people hold down very strongly to the idea of evolution, because they need it as their foundation of their belief. All right, and this and I'm glad though that when I was young, there were people who were willing to follow the Bible and tell me the truth. They did it in love, right? The Bible says in Ephesians 4:14, we need to speak the truth in love and they grow up in all things into him who's the head of Christ. So there were people in my high school, university years who talked to me about God, who taught me the right things about God. And they did it not because they wanted to show they're better than me. They did it because they loved me and they wanted me to know the truth, right? And this is why I want to talk to you today about this, because I hope you can be that person, right? There may be friends of yours who don't know Jesus yet, and they need to know the truth, right? And we're not talking about this topic because we want to be smarter or we want to debate, but we want to share with people what the truth is, right? To share God's love, and that's why God wants us to demolish these arguments, right? Right? Because he wants other people to know the truth of God's love and not be deceived by these high things that men have come up with. Okay, and another important thing is, so it's important for evangelism, for sharing the gospel, this topic, but it's also important for your personal faith as well. Jesus warned us in Matthew 6, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he'll be loyal to the one and despise the other. Right? You cannot serve two masters. I realized that after I became a Christian, I still had some ideas about evolution that I had difficulty reconciling. I had to make a decision, right? Is the Bible right or is evolution right? I can't serve two masters, right? If you do, and so if you're not clear on this topic, especially as a young person, what's going to happen as you get older is that these ideas of evolution are going to eat away at your faith. Okay. So very important, when not serve two masters, you have to be clear on this topic. Okay, so facing a challenge of evolution, test all things. The Bible says, hold fast what is real. Now, how do we do that? I want to use an example. I like detective novels and mystery novels. I don't know if you guys do or not. You know, usually there's a detective, right? So it's always fun, you know, you get to play detective. Let me use an example. Imagine there's been a murder, okay? And there are only two suspects. Tom and Jerry are the only ones who could have done it. There's nobody else with the opportunity to do it, okay? They're the only person who had the means, to be at the place where the murder occurred. No other choices. Several witnesses agree that the murderer is 6 foot tall, wears sunglasses, blue jeans, and has a scar on his left arm. So these are your clues, right? You got 4 clues there who the murderer is. So you start investigating. You track down Tom, and you notice that he is 6 foot tall. He wears sunglasses, and he's wearing blue jeans. Wow, 3 clues pointing directly to Tom as the murderer. Right? Remember, he's one of the only 2 people with the opportunity, and he fits the description. So with so much evidence pointing to Tom, he must be the murderer, right? 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 What's the chance that all 3 evidence point to one person, right? So Tom goes to prison as the murderer. Okay. End of the story? What would you do if you're a detective here? Would you wrap up the case right here? Why not?
Because we didn't look at the witness.
Oh, very good, very good. So as a good detective, right, you consider all possibilities. You go track down Jerry to make sure, right? Because there's much evidence against Tom, but who knows, right? Let's take a look. And guess what? Jerry is also 6 foot tall. He also wears sunglasses and blue jeans, and he has a scar on his left arm. But Tom doesn't. So now what happens? Tom is released, right? Instead, Jerry goes to prison. So what did we learn? What did we learn?
Check all the
Charity. Yeah, check all the facts. Check all the facts, right? Just because it seems very convincing, right? There's so much evidence against Tom. But if you don't check all the facts, you will go completely wrong. Okay. And today I want you to learn this way of looking at evidence. Okay. Who did it? Analyzing the evidence. When people tell you, if there are 2 possibilities, these are only 2, right? And you're trying to look at all the evidence pointing to them. Remember, you have to categorize your evidence. Okay. There are some facts that are consistent with Tom being the murderer and not Jerry, or what I call Tom only, right? There's some facts that point to Tom only. Okay. There are facts that point to either, right? The facts are consistent with either Tom or Jerry being the murderer. And then there are some facts that only point to Jerry, right? Jerry is the murderer and not Tom. Okay. So be very careful, because if the evidence is in the middle, it may be used to support either. And people will do that, especially people with an agenda, right? Right? Imagine if you're Jerry and you're trying to pin the blame on Tom. What would you do? Right? You tell your lawyer and say, look at Tom, he's a 6 foot tall, he wears the right clothes, and then so on, right? Okay, so be very careful. When people tell you, look, there's evidence for my theory, hold on a second. Does it only support your theory? Or does it also support something else? Right? What you need is evidence for Tom or Jerry that excludes the other person. Right? It shows that, so the scar is a good example, right? The scar is only on Jerry. So that shows Jerry's a murderer, not Tom. And same with everything else. So how do I apply this to creation and evolution? You can do the exact same thing. Okay. Does the evidence that's being presented for creation or evolution, because there are only 2 choices, right? Either God created everything, or we made ourselves, right? So one or the other. So the question is, when people present the evidence to you, look, this supports evolution, look, this supports creation, look, does the evidence you present only support one? Okay, because you need to support one and exclude the other for it to be proper evidence. Otherwise, you end up with the same mistake that you made with Tom, right? I'll give you an example. I mean, this is what happens. I see this a lot. An example that you will see in school. In school textbooks, they will tell you this. They'll say, look, evolution is true. Why? Because you look at an animal, they're so similar, right? You look at the whale and the cat, the The different animals, the limbs of different animals, they have some similarity, they call homology. Right? Or they look at genetics, some similarity, say, well, look, they're so similar, so they must be they from the same ancestor, right? Right? They're similar, why? Because they evolved from the same ancestor, right? Their ancestors were very similar. That's why even though they become more different as they over time, they still retain the similarity. Sounds convincing? Right? As convincing as Tom being a murderer, right? Okay, but hold on a second. Does that does seem to support evolution, but does that also support the idea that there's this God that created everything? Well, let me give you an example. Do these things have some similarities? What's similar about it? Yeah, so they must have evolved from the same ancestor, right? There's an ancestor with small wheels that got bigger and bigger, and then there's some of these wheels that became shop cars, and some of these wheels became roller skates, right? Is that what happens? No, it's because people designed them, right? Because the human beings design wheels. And once they design a wheel on something, they go, hey, you know, it's a good design, we'll use a wheel on something else. Right? So what happens? The same God creates everything. It's going to show some of his designs on different things that he makes, right? And guess what? It's a good idea, because what does God want us to know? Not only does God want us to know that he's our creator, he wants to know there's only one creator. Right? How does he make sure we know there's only one creator? He makes sure the things he makes have some similarities, so that we know that only one God that made it. Right? Imagine today if some of the animals that God made were made of flesh, and some animals were made of metal, and some animals were actually made of glass. What do you think people would say? People would think, hey, there must be three gods, right? There must be a God that makes glass, a God that makes metal, and a God that makes the flesh. So God says, no, I don't want you to make that mistake. There's only one God. So when you look at it carefully, this is just like someone who's 6 foot tall, or someone who wears blue jeans, right? It actually applies to both, right? The similarity among living beings could be because of either the same ancestor or the same creator. Both are possible, right? So at best, you would put it in the middle. It doesn't prove either, right? It could be either. But in fact, when you look at it a bit more closely at similarities, we realize that only a creation makes sense. I'll give you an example. Humans and frogs, you know, there's some similarities here, right? The human hand and the frog forelimb, they will call it hand, but you know, the frog has four digits in the front, then as five in the back, four in the front, and we have five. But you can see how they're very similar, right? Okay. They're very similar. So this is the back end of the frog, but they're very similar. Okay. So must be from the same ancestor, right? Well, but actually, even though they're very similar, they develop in exactly the opposite way. So in the human hand, what happens is that as we develop as a baby, the hand starts out like this, and then as it gets bigger, in between the fingers, cells die. And that's why you separate and you have 5 fingers. Okay, so 4 rows of cells die, and that's how you get 5 fingers. Have you ever heard of people with 6 fingers? Right? That's what happened is that they had 1 extra row of cells die, so they end up with 6. Right? Okay. But the frog is the opposite. Instead of in between the cells die, the fingers actually grow out. Okay, so they grow out 1 by 1. Right? So even though they look the same, one is formed by cell death, the other one is formed by cell growth. Right? So here example. So this is cells die in between versus cell growing out. Okay. So another picture here. So you can see like in between these these fingers, the cell die, and here the cell is actually growing out. So hold on a second. If God made them, of course, God can make the same thing in two different ways, right? Just like when we make wheels, we can use different ways we can use different type of factory, different materials to make wheels. That's no problem. But if humans and frogs are similar because they evolved from the same ancestor, how did the ancestor make the fingers? Is it by cell death or by cell growth? They're exactly opposite. Right? If the ancestor made it by cell death, then that ancestor is not the ancestor of the frog. Right? If the ancestor made it by cell growth, the ancestor is not our ancestor because the formation is exactly the opposite way. Right? So when you look at this similarity, you realize that the only reasonable explanation is that they're made by the same God, not from evolution. Right? So when you look at the human hand and the frog hand, you actually would have to put that evidence in this category here. Right? It actually points to creation. It actually excludes evolution. Because if evolution was true, the whole idea is that we're similar because our ancestors are the same. But hold on a second, we made the finger exactly the opposite way. Right? That means that our ancestors are doing the same. That made us actually separate. I'll give you one more example. Frogs and salamanders. Okay, they're very similar. In fact, some people find it difficult to tell them apart. And the frog limb and the salamander limb, they're also very similar. Right? You can see, right, how similar they are. Evolutionists would classify them as very similar related cousins. But scientists were very surprised to find, even though they look so similar, the development of the arm is completely different. I'll show you the picture. The order is completely different. Now the picture goes very quickly, so it's a bit hard to tell. But I'll slow it down a little bit for you. And here, so in the frog, as the arm grows out, for the frog, the outside bone goes first. Right, so the arm is like this. The forearm first is the outside bone and then the inside. For salamander, it's the opposite. The inside bone first and then the outside. For the wrist, the frog will grow the inside bones first and then the outside. But the salamander, outside first and then the inside. And then the fingers, look at the frog fingers. They go by 5, 6, 7, 8. But the salamander is 5, 6, 7, 8. Completely different, all jumbled orders. Right? Again, if they evolved from the same ancestor, it's because they inherited the same information, right? The same information, same instructions, same genes that tell the body how to make things. So how the same genes give completely different orders? Right? It's almost as if God purposely did it this way so that we know, hey, hold on a second, this didn't come by random chance. I made it, right? I made them very similar, but yet I did it in exactly completely different ways. So that they're actually created, they did not evolve by random chance. Okay. So I think I'm gonna, and in fact, there are many such evidences. So there are many things that show that only creation could be true and evolution must be wrong, and excludes evolution as a possibility. I want to share with you some of them. Some reasons why evolution is a blind faith. The first one I want to talk about is complex machines and living things. We find there are complex machines and living things. And I like this one because this is one that Darwin himself agreed is a problem. Right? In his book, Origin of Species, he said, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed, which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive life modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. Notice why he says any, right? If it could be demonstrated that any, because he realizes evolution has to explain every organ, right? Everything that ever existed in every living thing, right? Because there's no God, right? So if there's even one that's complex that cannot be explained by small gradual steps, then his theory would be wrong. Okay. Now, why does it say slight modification? Well, the problem is that evolution only works by small steps. And this is why he acknowledges, right? Because evolution, remember how we said is by copying mistakes, right? So every generation you have mutations and you make copying mistakes. Well, you can only have small mistakes every generation. You cannot have big mistakes, you will die, right? So small mistakes accumulate over time. But here's the problem. Let's say you have a complex organ. It requires 10 different parts to be present at the same time for it to work properly, right? It's not like as simple as a complex organ. Well, if you have a mutation that causes you to make the first part, that's not going to help you, right? So it doesn't help you to survive. So what's going to happen? It's going to be eliminated by natural selection, right? Because natural selection only keeps whatever helps you survive. Everything else gets eliminated. That's how it works. So you have all 10 parts together for it to work, but you never get it. Because every time you evolve one part, it gets eliminated by natural selection. Let's say you get really lucky and get 2 parts. Well, not good enough. They get eliminated by natural selection. You never get the complex organ. And that's why Darwin says, yeah, if there's a certain organ that cannot be explained by these gradual steps, like theory would be wrong. Now, Darwin didn't think that would be a problem because he didn't think the cell was very complicated, right? This is Darwin's drawing of cells. In his day, they didn't know how complicated cells were. So, well, the cell is just like a blob with some stuff in it. You know, it could have formed by random chance. It's not a problem, right? It's not complicated. Very easy to form. Well, he was wrong, right? Because now we know a single cell is as complicated as a city the size of New York. Okay, and it's very complicated in the sense that each part is necessary for the work properly. So you have a nucleus, for example, in the middle of the cell that has all the instructions on how the cell should run, right? And you have ribosomes, which are the factories of the cell, right? That make different parts to make different proteins, which are the building blocks of the cell. You think of if a cell is made out of Lego, right? Then the proteins are like Lego blocks, different types of Lego blocks. So you need ribosomes to get a factory to make these blocks that build the cell. You need mitochondria that the plants, it really needs power, right? To run. You have Golgi bodies for the post office to make sure you know the right places get the right things get the right places. You have microtubules with the highways in the cell. You have kinesins, which are the trucks that run on highways to send things to different places. You have lysosomes, which are garbage disposal. Right? Because lysosomes get rid of the waste, otherwise the cell will fall away, so be toxic, you'll die. You have membrane, which are the border, is like a border control, right? Because if there's no border, bad things come in and the good food goes out, and the cell will die as well. All these parts have to be there. And guess what? How do you evolve that? Right? Imagine the first step of evolution, you get a nucleus where there's nothing to order around. The nucleus will die, right? So the first step, you get a ribosome. You have factories that don't know. What's going to happen? You will die. But if you first get a power plant, well, there's power, there's nothing to run. You die. Right? You get highways, but there's no trucks. You get trucks, but there's no road. It cannot work. All of them have to be together at the same time. And guess what? This is one example of complexity that Darwin cannot explain. He didn't realize it, right? So that's why he wanted to go. Yeah, that's okay. If there are some organs like this, then yeah, maybe still people do well. But it's okay because there's nothing complicated. Everything can be explained. But now we know the cell cannot be explained by evolution. I'll show you a little clip here of the cell's transport system.
Information that the heart is studying our function. Did you know that they'll even at a post office? There's these specialized molecules called kinesins. They're in charge of delivering packs of material to different parts of the cell. But in their journey, they go to pre-specified destinations. Without that addressing system, cell couldn't even work.
Yeah, so these are the highways. The cell actually builds highways, okay, inside, and there are these trucks, right? These kinesin molecules, they're just literally walking on the highway, right? The big thing on top is the cargo. This is what they're carrying the different parts of. So again, what came first, right? You get the highways first, so there's no truck on the highway. Right? If there's no, and if you make a kinesin first, well, there's nothing, there are no tubules for kinesin to run on. What's the point of having that? Right? And what's more amazing to me is how does the kinesin know where to go? right? Yeah, automatically happen. You don't have to tell yourself, hey, send this here and send this here. Everything goes. Because God has owned it. Right? Did not come by random chance. So that's the post office, the highways, and the Kanisa. But I think one of the most amazing things about the cell is the DNA. Okay, so the DNA is inside the nucleus. Remember I said that the nucleus is like three orders orders the cell what to do, right? It has all the information, all the instructions to the cell that tell the cell what to do. And the DNA is a language. It's different parts of the DNA. It's a molecule, but different parts of the molecule, like let's say A adenosine, is like a letter in a language. And then so these are it's kind of it's a language of domination for us to tell for the cell to communicate within the cell, for the nucleus to communicate with different parts of the cell. And based on this language, the instruction of DNA, the cell makes certain proteins. So for example, here you have a strand of DNA, right? And based on the instructions, in this case RNA, based on the instructions, the right order of proteins are being made out there. And let me show you a little clip just to show how this works. So we're looking inside the cell.
With computer animation, we can enter the cell to view this remarkable system at work.
Now we're going inside the nucleus.
After entering the heart of the cell, we see the tightly wound strands of DNA, storehouses for the instructions.
It's like a library, right? This is a library with lots of different letters. There are 3 billion letters. 3 billion letters of
The process known as transcription. Molecular machine first combines a section of the DNA helix to expose the genetic instructions.
So first you have to open the book, open the section of the book you want, and you make a copy of the instructions in that book.
Then copies these instructions to form a molecule known as messenger RNA.
And again, this is all automatic, right? You don't tell the cell to do this. God made it, and it just does this automatically. It reads the right part.
When transcription is complete, the slender RNA strand carries the genetic information for the nucleophore complex. The gatekeeper traffics in and out of the cell nucleus.
Yeah, so this information gets sent out of the nucleus. Okay? And now it goes to the factory.
The messenger RNA strand is directed to a two-part molecular factory called a ribosome.
So this is the factory, right?
After attaching itself securely, the process of translation begins.
So based on the instruction it's given, it makes the right sequence, right? So you have to match the top is the instruction and the bottom here.
Inside the ribosome, a molecular assembly line builds a specifically sequenced chain of amino acids. These amino acids are transported from other parts of the cell and then linked into chains often hundreds of units long. Their sequential arrangement determines the type of protein manufactured.
Order is very important. I'm going to talk about that in a bit more detail. The order has to be just right, and that's why the ribosome has a problem instruction.
When the chain is finished, it is moved from the ribosome to a barrel-shaped machine that helps fold it into the precise shape critical to its function. After the chain is folded into a protein, it is then released and shepherded by another molecular machine to the exact location where it is needed.
Because the shape has to be exactly right. That's why the sequence has to be right. In the wrong sequence, if you not fold it properly and you don't fold it properly, the shape is wrong, it doesn't work. Right? So it has to be very precise. So it's an amazing machine, very complicated. All these parts have to be there, right? Together to work. And that's why, you know, there's a Anthony Bloom, he's an atheist, he used to be an atheist professor that debate Christians, that he would go on debates with famous Christians about why there's no resurrection, why there's no God, and so on. But he wrote a book He passed away now, but before he died, he wrote a book called There Is a God. There is no God, but he crossed out the word no. There is a God. So he changed his mind about God. Now, why did he change his mind? I mean, he wrote in his book the reasons, and one thing he said was this: what I think that DNA material has done is that it has shown by the almost unbelievable complexity of the arrangements that are necessary for this life, that intelligence must have been involved in getting these extraordinary diverse elements to work together. Isn't it interesting? Just like how Darwin said in the very beginning, right? If there's complexity that you cannot explain by small gradual steps by evolution, then the theory is wrong. Well, even a diehard atheist who argues with Christians about why there's no God, he has to admit, look, you're right, right? The complexity we see in DNA shows that there must be a God. Right. So that's reason number one why evolution is a blind faith, right? If you believe that all these complexity, well, Darwin told us it can be, right? Even Darwin himself admits that complexity shows that evolution would be wrong. Second reason I want to talk about is the problem of chance. The problem of chance. Now, why should I talk about chance? Because remember that we just looked at the example. The protein has to be the right sequence, right? If it's not in the right sequence, and that's why the instruction is very important. If it's not in the right sequence, you can just randomly make one. It won't work properly. I'll give you an example. This gentleman here has this Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. Duchenne's muscular dystrophy is a condition where when you're born, you feel fine, but as you get older, your muscles become progressively weaker. The patient here, this is from the Toronto Sun. He was pictured when he was about 22 years old, and his muscles had become so weak that he uses a respirator. You can see it as a ventilator, right? His muscles are too weak, he cannot breathe on his own, so he needs to have a machine help him breathe. Okay, what causes this is a mutation in the protein called dystrophin. So dystrophin, you see this picture here, dystrophin is a protein that's made out of 3,684 amino acids, a very long chain protein. And if you have a mistake, you have a mutation in the wrong place, one mutation in the wrong place, then you get this condition. So you can see how crucial it is to get the right sequence. Okay, but according to evolution, this happen by chance, right? So proteins need to be in the right sequence to function properly. Is it reasonable to believe that amino acids randomly arrange themselves in the correct order to form the proteins of the first cell? That's the question you have to consider. Is that reasonable, right? Can it happen by random chance? Well, since we're talking about chance, let's take a look at an example of law of 649. So imagine you have a friend, very optimistic friend. He tells you, I'm going to buy a lot of 649 ticket today, and I'm going to win the jackpot. What would you say to your friend? You say, yeah, go for it, right? You encourage him, right? No, if you're a good friend, you wouldn't do that because you know that's not it. That's blind faith, right? If you believe that you're going to get rich, not by working hard, but by buying a lottery ticket, that's blind faith. Right? Because the probability of winning the losses for that jackpot is 1 in 14 million. Right? So that would be blind faith. But imagine your friend doesn't give up, right? Your friend says, don't worry, I got a plan. I have a method to my madness. I'm going to keep trying every week, right? If I keep trying every week, one day I'll win, right? What do you think? Is that logical? No, why not?
You would have to try for too long.
Yeah, that's right. You don't have long enough. That's the problem, right? Because if you buy 10 tickets, of course, the more tickets you buy, the better your chances are. But the problem is not enough, because if you buy 10 tickets, your odds increase a little bit from 1 to 1 in 1.4 million, right? If you buy 100 tickets, become 1 in 140,000. Even if you buy 1,000 tickets, right, which is the equivalent of a ticket every week for 20 years, right? So imagine around 50 weeks in a year, right? If you buy a ticket every week for 20 years, that's about 1,000 tickets. Well, your chance only goes up to 1 in 14,000. Again, it's blind faith, right? If your friend has infinite life, right? Imagine your friend say, I'll live for 1,000,000 years. Oh yeah, sure, go ahead. You live for 1,000,000 years. Yeah, you keep buying and you eventually win. And by the way, you need to save that money, you probably have more. Then you will win by lottery anyways. And then you live for 1,000,000 years, right? But the whole point is you don't have a loan. Okay? And this is the key. So you shouldn't buy lottery ticket. Why? Because when we work out the math, we realize life is too short for you to have a realistic chance of winning the jackpot. 1,000 chances are too few when we're talking about 1 in 14 million, right? And that's why it'd be blind faith for you to believe that you'll win the jackpot. I want you to remember this, right? The problem here is the number of chances is not enough, right? Because you only have 1,000 chances, right? Or then that's not enough for 14 million. If you have like maybe 1,000,000 chances, okay, then you're getting closer. It's still 1 in 14, but you're getting closer, right? So the key here, the number of chances has to approach the probability. Okay. Now now that we learned this, let's go back to the example of the protein. So this structure we looked at is made of 3,684 amino acids. Let's take a smaller protein, hemoglobin, right? Hemoglobin is something we're familiar with. It's something that's in our blood, helps us, the cell carry oxygen, many cells have it, many different animals have it. Okay, so there are 20 main kinds of amino acids in living things. Even if we give evolution, let's make it as easy as possible for evolution. Let's say that there's a sea of different amino acids, okay? Like, again, evolution has to explain how they come from. Let's say we give them that. Let's say we give evolution a sea of the 20 different type of amino acids right there. And let's say we even give them a machine that can randomly arrange all these amino acids together. Because actually, amino acids, they don't come together themselves, right? They break down rather than come together, right? In natural environment, they actually don't come together for proteins. Instead, proteins actually break down. But anyway, let's say that we give them a machine to do that. What's the chance? What's the probability that they could be randomly arranged to form a protein the size of hemoglobin? Well, let's think about it, right? The protein 574 amino acids. So what's the chance of getting the first amino acid right? The 20 amino acids, what's the chance of getting the first one right? It's 1 in 20, right? Now, what's the chance of getting the first one and the second one both right?
20 times 20.
Yeah, 1 in 20 times 1 in 20. So it's not, you don't add it, you multiply. So the chance is actually 1 in 400. So let's work out the math, right? That if it's 574 amino acids, the chance is 1 in 40 times 1 in 40, sorry, 1 in 21 times 1 in 20, 574 times. What number do we get? You put in the calculator, is 1 over 6.18 times 10, 1 over 6 is 1 in 6.1, or let's say 1 in 6 times 10 to the power of 746. That's a number 10 with 746 zeros behind it. Now, this is an inconceivable number, right? Like, you just can't imagine what kind of number that is. To give you a perspective, to give you an idea of what we're talking about here. Remember, we talked about winning the lottery, right? The chance of winning the lottery is with 1 ticket. Let's say you buy 1 ticket, you win the lottery, chance of that happening is 1 in 14 million. Now imagine I get very lucky. I buy a ticket and I win. Right? Apparently, 18-year-old somewhere in Ontario happens to me, right? But that's great. I'm very lucky. But I'm not satisfied. Next week, I again buy another ticket. Guess what? I won the jackpot. And then I said, hey, I'm lucky. I might as well keep going. The next week, I again buy a single ticket. And guess what? I win again 3 weeks in a row. And I just keep going. And I keep doing this for 2 years straight. 104 weeks. Okay? What's the chance of that happening to me? That would be 1 in 14 million to the power of 104, right? If you do that for 104 weeks. That number is 1 over the power of 1.5 times 10 to the power of 740.
Which of these two are more likely? The chance of me winning the lottery plus 649 for 2 years straight, every single week. Or protein forming by random chance. Which one is more likely of the two? You look at these two numbers here, which one is bigger? The first one. Okay. So the chance of a protein like Lewis, just one single protein forming by random chance is less likely than me buying a ticket every single week and winning that ticket every single time for 2 years. Now, by the way, imagine that really happened, right? Imagine I buy a ticket, I win $1,649 jackpot. Like, and next week I won again. What was your reaction? Actually, when I first win it, what's your reaction? Like the first time winning it, what would your reaction be?
Lucky.
Yeah, lucky, right? You'd be happy for me, right? You'd be happy that I wanted the last 649. You might be wondering why the stuff don't buy but anyway, you'll be happy that I won it. But what's your reaction when I won in the second? What would you be thinking in your mind when I win the second? It's fake. Yeah, and not just you. I guarantee the police will be at my door. I'm serious. This is how they catch I mean, they do this, right? It's not even just if you win even pretty big prizes, if we had it like 2 or 3 times in a row, they will come to your door. Now, why do they come to your door? I'm just lucky. Because they know that's not random chance. Because they know it's not random chance. And there's no way they'll let me win the third one, right? Or I win 2 jackpots. If I win the third one, they don't even question me. They just send me to a straight to jail. Because they know, we don't know how you did it, but you must have done something, right? Why? Because they know it's not random chance. And this is the thing, right? This is so ironic because in real life, we know that this cannot be random chance, right? We know that. But how come we don't know that? It's not hypocritical. Right? Okay, so remember this, guys, right? Don't believe it. Evolution is blind faith, right? You believe that this is not only random chance. That cannot be random chance either. Hemoglobin did not come by random chance. Hemoglobin was made by God at the time. Now, remember your friend with the ticket, right? He wants to keep buying tickets. Evolution is the same. At this point, evolution might say, hold on a second. We have billions of years, right? You say it's not likely. You say it's not going to happen by random chance, but we have billions of years with lots of time, right? Remember your friend, you buy tickets for millions of years, and you eventually win the jackpot, right? So if you have evolution going on for billions of years, eventually will happen, right? What do you think, Charlie?
Or like 5 years.
Yeah, but for evolution, is not enough time. So let's work it out. You remember the chance is 1 over the power of 10, is 10 to the power of 746, right? Okay, so how small a chance is that? Let's say we have 14 billion years in evolution. The evolution believes in Big Bang that happened 14 billion years ago. So let's say 14 billion years. Let's skip that. I don't believe that, but let's skip in that. 14 billion years times 365 days a year, times 24 hours a day, times 60 minutes an hour, times 60 seconds a minute, you come to about 10 to the 18 seconds. We round it up to 18, actually 10 to the 17 something, but 10 to 18 seconds. So yeah, 14 billion years sounds like a lot, but actually it's nothing compared to the chance of forming one single hemoglobin, right? Because with 18 compared to 746, not enough chances. Remember just like the tickets, right? 1,000 tickets is not enough if it's 14 million, right? And right here, you only have 18 tickets, right? That's not enough for 746. Right? But some people still won't give up, and they'll say, "But when for a big universe, yeah, sure, maybe it doesn't happen here, but that's a very big universe. It could happen somewhere else. Maybe evolution happens somewhere else, life starting somewhere else, and it came there, right?" But again, the same problem. You get the same numbers problem. The universe, how big is it? or scientists are calculating, different ways of calculating, like you can look at how many galaxies, how many stars in the galaxy, how many atoms and so on. But there are different ways of calculating, you get around the same result in the end. If there are about 10 to the 80 atoms, 10 to the power of 80 atoms, in the observable universe. So that's the part of the universe that actually has an impact on us, that we can actually observe, that we can interact with. Again, that's not enough, right? If the probability is 10 to the power of 746, one over 10 to the power of 746, and you only have 10 to the power of 18 seconds, and you only have 10 to the power of 80 atoms, that's not enough. There's not enough time, there's not enough matter in the whole universe for one single hemoglobin to form a random chance. Forget about life. Okay. For the sake of argument, remember the machine I talked about that rearranges different atoms? Let's say that, let's keep evolution down. Let's say I have a huge machine, okay? You can rearrange not just a sea of amino acid, you can actually arrange the entire universe. You can randomly arrange all the atoms in the universe once a second for 14 billion years. Then how many arrangements of these atoms? In other words, how many tickets I can get to hit the jackpot of hemoglobin, right? These are random arrangements to find a particular sequence that can give me hemoglobin. I will only get 10 to the 80 atoms times 10 to the 18 seconds, which is 10 to the 98 arrangements. That's all the tickets I get. Again, 98 tickets is not enough for 746, right? I even want to go faster. Then some people might say, well, maybe the reaction can happen faster. Well, the shortest period of time is the Planck second. No reaction can happen faster than the Planck second time. That's the minimum time in physics. Okay. So a Planck second is 10 to the minus 44 seconds. So even the fastest possible way, you can only get 10 to the 80 times 10 to the 62, or 10 to the power of 1 times the 42 arrangements. Again, that means that you can only have 10 to the power of 142 tickets, but you need to get a probability of 10 to the power of 746. So again, impossible. Not even one hemoglobin, right? And this is my raw calculation. Other scientists have done similar calculations. So this one is from MIT scientist, Dr. Seth Loy. He's a specialty in quantum computing, right? He's looking at and he looked at the computational capacity of the universe. In other words, you look at the whole universe at a massive computer. How many bits of information you can hold, and how much thing can be processed in it, right? And the maximum is 10 to the power of 120. That means that anything that requires more operations than that, which hemoglobin does, because hemoglobin is only 1 over, the probability is only 1 over 10 to the power of 746, it cannot happen. Okay, so the problem of chance, I know this is a lot of math, I apologize, but this means that evolution could not happen. It's not even one single hemoglobin, which means that there must be God who created hemoglobin. And by the way, all the other proteins and all the other things. So that leads me to one last one. I'm going to try to go through this one quickly. Is the origin of life. One last reason that we can find the origin of life. Because life doesn't just require one hemoglobin. Scientists have studied in 2006 the minimum requirement that the smallest possible cell that could be considered alive requires 387 different kinds of proteins. So you cannot even make one. How do you get 387? Obviously, you're not. And by the way, 387 types, right? But each type, you need a lot of them. How many do you need total for the cell? You need about 3 to 4 million proteins just for the very basic cell, like a neuron, right? So again, you cannot even make one. How do you make 2 million? So life is not happened by random chance. Life has to be designed by God. Also, you look at a textbook, or you go to high school, we study science in high school, it'll tell you, well, life started without oxygen, because oxygen is very reactive, will destroy any organic compound not protected within the cells, right? So you would say life evolved without oxygen. This is what textbook will tell you, because they believe that life is by random chance. Some have believe in there was no oxygen. But guess what? Evidence is that we have the Earth has always had oxygen. when we dig deep into the earth, we find as deep down we dig, supposedly the early earth, we still have oxidized molecules like this one here. This is iron oxide. Okay. And scientists have been doing these studies for many years, and now this is another article in 2011. It says that new findings directly challenge years of research on the type of atmosphere out of which life arose on our planet. We now can say with some certainty that many scientists study the origin of life on Earth simply pick the wrong atmosphere. They actually pick the wrong atmosphere. So why did they pick the wrong atmosphere? Not because they had evidence, but because they had to believe it, right? Because for evolution to be true, there can be no oxygen, right? So that's why they say there's no oxygen. But guess what? There is. Which means that life did not started by random chance, right? If the oxygen was there, if there were any protein, any beginnings of proteins forming, they would be destroyed by oxygen. Another problem is the so-called chirality or Hammond's problem. So you can see these two molecules here, there's the same chemical composition, they're the same atoms, but they're actually mirror images of each other, right? Okay, so like the right and left hand, is your right hand the same as your left hand? Well, not the same, it's a mirror image. So if I put a glove on, I cannot put my left hand glove on my right hand, it won't fit, right? But here's the problem. When molecules form by random chance, they always form equal parts right and left, of course, right? You randomly form, there's no reason for you to be right-handed and left or left-handed. But all amino acids are left-handed. All amino acids are left-handed. And if you put a right-handed amino acid in with the left-handed ones, you'll be toxic. You'll be like poison, right? So how can that be random chance? How can all the amino acids that all the things have be the same handedness unless God made it that way, right? If they can by random chance, they should be equal parts one versus the other. In fact, life would not never have started because it's important. So, and by this is the and some of us may be old enough to remember in 1950s there was the so-called thalidomide tragedy. There was a medication that was made that was given to pregnant women that caused birth defects. Now, the problem was that they made this medication in a right-handed, the same molecule, a right-handed form was safe, and they studied it out was safe. But they didn't realize that when the same molecule, when it's left-handed, it actually causes poison. It actually poison and causes disease, right? So this is a good example where the same molecule, the same chemical composition, but left and right-handed, completely opposite effect, right? But yet we don't have that problem because God made us. Right, God made us all in the same. Some people even joke, does that mean God is left-handed? So no, but that's just a joke. But yeah, but it's funny how God made all the amino acids left-handed. One last thing is that proteins and DNA, right? There's a chicken and egg problem. You need DNA as an instruction to make proteins, and you need proteins as the machine that manufacturing make DNA. So which one came first? Let me ask you a question. Which came first, chicken or egg? What does the Bible say? Chicken, yeah. Chicken came first. Because the Bible says that God created animals according to the kind. The Bible did not say that God created eggs according to the kind. Right? So the first God made chickens, right? And then they make eggs. See, when you believe God, when you believe the Bible, you have very good answers. You have answers to many questions that people find hard to answer. Evolution can answer that, right? And in fact, they can answer this chicken and egg problem either, because which one came first? You need both. Now, for us, God made DNA, God made protein, there's no problem. But for evolution, they cannot explain which one came first, protein or DNA. Okay, I'm going to skip this part because we have the baptism coming, but I'll be happy to talk about this. But basically, my summary here is that there are lots of evidence that show that only creation is right. Okay, so whether you look at complex machines and living things, whether you look at the problem of chance, whether you look at the origin of life, you know that these are evidences that show that we have to have been created, right? And they show that evolution must be a blind faith, right? So don't be fooled. When you're in school or when you sometimes in university, in high school university, you're going to hear a lot in the middle column. They're going to tell you lots of things, but they say, oh, animals are similar, and that shows evolution. Well, no, hold on a second. Animals are similar to people. Okay.
So be very careful, don't get fooled, because they're going to only show you one side. Let me go back to the example I showed you in the very beginning of the detective. Imagine this is what happened instead. Let's play detective censored version. There's been a murder. And Tom and Jerry are the only ones that could have done it. But you are told only about Tom and not Jerry. You're only told about one suspect. Witnesses say the murderer is 6 foot tall, wears sunglasses, blue jeans, and has a scar on his left arm. The witnesses haven't changed anything, right? So you track down Tom and notice that he is 6 foot tall, wears sunglasses and blue jeans, but you're not told about his scar, about Tom not having his scar. Okay. What conclusion would you reach? What conclusion would you reach if that's the case? In this case, you would convict Tom, right? You send Tom to jail, right? But this is what happens. This is what happened today. In school today, you are told only one possibility: evolution. Right? You're not talking. You're only told about Tom and not Jerry. Right? You only presented evidence on one side. Right? And by the way, because again, this is not even one side. It's evidence that could support both sides. But you're not told about that. You're not told about the other possibility. Right? And most importantly, you're not being told about the crucial evidence that shows that Jerry is the murderer. Right? You're not being told the crucial evidence that creation is true, but evolution is not true. Because schools can teach that. It's supposed to be a secular education. So be very careful. Be very careful, right? So this is the problem, right? In school, you get taught the middle, only the middle, right? And by the way, in case you're wondering, there's nothing here. There's no evidence that shows that evolution is true and creation is wrong, right? There's no evidence here. But they can show this. Yeah, there are some facts that could be told. But what they will show those facts to you, but they will only talk about evolution, they will talk about creation, and you'll be fooled. Okay, so be careful. And know about this part. They're not going to issue this, so you have to learn this on your own. These are some good websites. If you that for these are Christian organizations. Creation.com is Canadian. Some of the other ones are based in the US. So equip yourselves, know the facts, because you're not going to hear about these in school. Okay, know these facts yourself, and remember to weigh your evidence carefully. Weigh the evidence carefully. God calls us. God warns us, right? There will be people who claim these high things. The people that will tell you, look, you're the greatest. You're the greatest. You know, there's nothing higher than you. There's no God. You're the greatest. You survived millions of years of evolution. You're the highest animal. They'll tell you that. They'll pop you up. But that's a lie. That's a lie, right? Let's hold on to the knowledge of God. The knowledge of God is that God made us. He loves us. Right? Even though we've done things and said things that don't please him, he loves us and he wants us to be with him one day in heaven. And so let's hold on to that faith, and not only hold on for ourselves, but share that faith with our friends. Right? Let's know the truth and share that with our friends, so that more people can come to know that Jesus is their Savior, just like he is ours. Let's pray. Dear Father, we thank you for the time that we have to get today to study your word. Thank you for your wonderful word. It really has the knowledge of God and has all the wonderful truth in it. Help us to know it better, and help us also to know the evidence to show that you are the creator of this world, that you're the one, that the Bible is your word. Give us wisdom when we talk to our friends, and that you may convict their hearts, that they will know that you are the creator also, and that you love them, and that you want them to come back to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Ho, for this very rich sermon.